The word hit me like ice water, Mommy. I froze in the doorway of Jin's apartment as his 6-year-old son Leo rushed toward me with arms wide open, his face bright with innocent joy. Behind him, Jin's traditional Korean mother stood rigid, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as she watched her grandson embrace the Nigerian woman who was supposed to be nothing more than her son's workplace rival. Leo, no, Jin's voice cracked, but it was too late. The damage was done. 8 months of carefully buried feelings, hidden glances, and professional antagonism had just exploded in one perfect, devastating word. Mrs. Park's eyes narrowed as she took in my cornrows, my colorful Ankara dress, the way Leo clung to me like I belonged here. I had walked into this apartment thinking I was just dropping off quarterly reports. Instead, I'd stepped into a cultural minefield that would either destroy everything we'd built or force us to finally admit what we'd been hiding from ourselves. Before I tell you how we got here, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna, where stories like this reveal the secrets families try to bury. 8 months earlier, I would have laughed if someone told me Jin Park would become anything more than my biggest professional headache. We were both department heads at Samsung's Lagos office, competing for the same promotion to regional director. The company had made it clear, only one of us would get it. Jin represented everything I couldn't stand about corporate culture. Methodical. Formal. Always dressed in perfectly pressed suits that somehow stayed crisp in Lagos humidity. He spoke in careful, measured sentences during meetings, taking notes in precise Korean characters while I threw out rapid-fire ideas and challenged every assumption. Your approach lacks systematic analysis, he said during our first joint presentation, his voice politely disapproving. Your approach lacks soul, I shot back, watching his jaw tighten. The Nigerian staff loved my directness. I brought palm wine to late-night strategy sessions, switched between English and Yoruba depending on who I was talking to, and wasn't afraid to call out bad ideas regardless of who suggested them. Jin operated differently. He built consensus slowly, respected hierarchy, and somehow managed to get people to follow his lead without ever raising his voice. We were oil and water. Fire and ice. Nigerian warmth meeting Korean formality. But I started noticing things about him that didn't fit my assumptions. The way he always offered to walk female colleagues to their cars after dark. How he quietly helped our junior staff with their presentations without taking credit. The respect in his voice when he asked me to explain local customs he didn't understand. During the company retreat in Abuja, I found him sitting alone while traditional Yoruba drummers performed. He looked lost, almost vulnerable in a way that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Not enjoying our cultural evening? I asked, settling beside him despite myself. I don't want to misunderstand something important, he said quietly. In Korea, we have specific protocols for cultural appreciation. I don't know the rules here. Something about his honesty caught me off guard. Instead of mocking him, I found myself explaining the folktale the dancers were performing, watching his face light up with genuine interest. But 3 weeks later, everything changed. I was leaving late from the office when I noticed Jin's phone screen lighting up on his desk. He'd stepped away for coffee, and the notification preview made my breath catch. A photo of a little boy at what looked like a school carnival, sitting alone on a bench with cotton candy, his smile bright but somehow lonely. The timestamp showed it was from that afternoon. A school event Jin had missed while we were in budget meetings. When Jin returned, he quickly flipped his phone face down, but not before I caught the slight tremor in his hands. For the first time since I'd known him, the perfect, composed Jin Park looked utterly vulnerable. My rival wasn't just hiding a systematic approach to business. He was hiding something much more personal. Something that made all our professional competitions suddenly feel very small. The memory hit me 6 weeks later as I watched Jin decline another after-work invitation. This time it was Friday drinks at Terra Culture, the kind of cultural gathering that usually brought our diverse team together. Everyone was going except Jin. Family obligation, he said simply, gathering his files with that same careful precision. But I remembered that photo. The little boy with cotton candy and a lonely smile. What's his name? I asked quietly. Jin's hands stilled on his briefcase. For a moment, I thought he might pretend not to understand. Then his shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. Leo, he said. His name is Leo. The way he said it, like the name held his entire world, made my chest ache in ways I didn't expect. This wasn't just Jean the competitor anymore. This was Jean the father, carrying invisible weight I'd never bothered to notice. How old? 6. Jin's voice softened. He starts primary school next month. I promised him I'd help pick out his uniform this weekend. I found myself smiling. That's important. School uniforms are serious business in Nigeria. Something shifted in Jin's expression. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude that I understood without judgment. His mother. Jean started, then stopped. It's complicated. I didn't push. But as I watched him leave that evening, walking with purpose toward whatever family responsibility waited for him, I realized our rivalry had been built on incomplete information. I'd been competing with a man whose priorities went far beyond corporate advancement. That weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Leo. 6 years old. Starting school. Needing uniform help from a father who somehow managed single parenthood while excelling at one of Lagos's most demanding companies. Monday morning brought a new dynamic between us. Jean still challenged my ideas, but when I suggested we take our client presentation meeting earlier so he could leave by 5, he looked at me with something approaching wonder. You don't have to. Everyone should be home for dinner with their family, I said, meaning it. The presentation went perfectly. My creative energy balanced his methodical preparation. Nigerian clients responded to my cultural ease while respecting his technical expertise. For the first time, we felt like partners instead of adversaries. Good work today, Jean said as we packed up. You too. I hesitated, then added, tell Leo the first said good luck with his first week of school. Jin's smile was like sunrise. He'd like that. He's nervous about making friends. Smart kid gets that from somewhere, I said, and watched Jin's ears turn red in a way that was decidedly endearing. The following weeks blurred together in a strange new rhythm. Jean and I began coordinating our schedules naturally. When he needed to leave early for Leo's doctor appointment, I covered his client calls. When I had late strategy sessions with our Nigerian partners, Jean handled the Korean vendor relations that required morning Seoul time zone calls. Our colleagues started noticing. You two seem to be working together better, observed Kemi from accounting during lunch. We found common ground, I said, which was both true and completely inadequate. The common ground was deeper than work efficiency. Jean brought me Korean pear snacks during long afternoon meetings. I made sure our catered working lunches included kimchi alongside jollof rice, watching him try to hide his grateful surprise. When he struggled with local vendors who switched between English and Yoruba mid-conversation, I translated without being asked. Your Korean is improving, he said one evening as I successfully ordered our dinner from the Korean restaurant near the office. Your Yoruba isn't bad either, I replied, having heard him greet our security guard in perfectly pronounced "Iku Ero" that morning. We were learning each other's languages without declaring it. Building bridges we pretended were just professional courtesy. But the real shift happened on a Wednesday evening in October. Jin's phone rang during our quarterly budget review, and I watched his face transform with panic. Mrs. Adunni? His voice was tight with worry. What do you mean he's sick? How sick? I'll be right there. He was already standing, scattering papers in his haste. My nanny, he explained, voice strained. Leo has fever. She can't stay overnight, and I have the Samsung Seoul video call at 6 a.m. tomorrow. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I'll help. Jean froze. What? I'll help with Leo tonight. You handle your morning call, then take him to the doctor. Zara, you don't understand. He's not. I mean, you've never. I have 3 younger cousins, I said firmly. I know how to handle a sick child. And I know how important that Seoul presentation is for both our departments. Jean looked at me like I'd offered him something impossible. You would do that? For me? The question hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to name. For Leo, I said, which was safer. And because missing that presentation would set back our Q4 targets by weeks. But when Jean smiled, really smiled, with gratitude and something warmer, I knew I was lying to myself about my motivations. An hour later, I followed Jin's Toyota through Lagos traffic toward a part of Victoria Island I'd never visited. His apartment building was modern but understated, with security guards who greeted him in Korean and waved respectfully. Leo? Jean called as we entered. I brought a friend to help take care of you. The little boy who appeared from the hallway was everything I'd imagined and nothing I was prepared for. Rumpled school uniform, fever-flushed cheeks, and eyes that were unmistakably his father's. But where Jean was reserved, Leo radiated curiosity. Are you Daddy's work friend? He asked, studying me with 6-year-old directness. I am, I said, crouching to his level. I'm Zara. Your daddy told me you're not feeling well. My tummy hurts, Leo said solemnly. And Mrs. Adunny had to go home to her own children. The matter-of-fact way he accepted adult priorities breaking down around him made my heart clench. This little boy was used to disappointments, used to adjusting his needs to fit his father's complicated life. Well, I said, I know some good remedies for tummy aches. But first, should we get you into comfortable clothes? As Jean disappeared to prepare for his early morning presentation, I found myself in territory I'd never expected, helping a Korean 6-year-old navigate the intersection of fever, homesickness, and the peculiar comfort that comes from someone new caring about your small problems. If you're feeling that same shock I felt when Leo looked at me with complete trust, subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna. Because what happened next changed everything we thought we knew about family, love, and the choices we make to protect the people we love most. That night with Leo became a turning point I didn't see coming. By morning, his fever had broken, and I'd learned things about Jin's life that made our workplace rivalry seem absurdly shallow. Daddy has to work a lot because people in Korea don't sleep when we sleep, Leo explained as I helped him with breakfast. That's why Mommy went away. She said it was too hard. The casual way he mentioned his mother's departure hit me harder than any corporate presentation ever could. This little boy had been abandoned by someone who was supposed to love him unconditionally, and he'd accepted it with the resignation of a child who'd learned early that adults leave. What was she like? I asked gently, spreading jam on his toast. Pretty. And sad. She cried a lot when Daddy worked late. Leo swung his legs from the kitchen chair. She spoke Korean to Daddy's phone friends but English to me. She said Korean was too hard for Nigerian children. My hands stilled on the jam jar. Korean was too hard for Nigerian children. As if Leo wasn't both. As if his identity needed to be split in half to make sense. Do you want to learn Korean? I asked. Leo's face lit up. Daddy teaches me words sometimes. But he says I shouldn't confuse people by mixing languages. The picture became clearer with painful precision. Jin's ex-wife had created a household where Korean culture and Nigerian life couldn't coexist. Where their son learned to compartmentalize his identity before he could even read. Where Jin carried the guilt of choosing his career over his marriage, not realizing his wife had already chosen cultural comfort over their family. When Jean emerged from his home office 2 hours later, looking exhausted but satisfied with his Seoul presentation, he found Leo and me building a Korean-Nigerian flag out of Lego blocks. Zara taught me that Korean families can live in Nigeria if they want to, Leo announced proudly. And that speaking two languages makes you special, not confused. Jin's expression shifted through several emotions, surprise, gratitude, and something deeper that made my pulse quicken. She's right, he said quietly. You are special, exactly as you are. But the moment shattered when Jin's phone buzzed with a message that made his face go pale. What's wrong? I asked. My mother. His voice was hollow. She's flying in from Seoul tonight. Surprise visit. The way he said it told me everything. This wasn't a happy family reunion. She doesn't know about. Jin gestured helplessly around his apartment, which clearly reflected someone comfortable with Nigerian life. Ankara fabric cushions mixed with Korean pottery. Yoruba children's books beside Korean language textbooks. The fusion of two cultures that his ex-wife had rejected. About what? But I already knew. About any of this. The way we live here. How settled we are. She thinks I'm planning to bring Leo back to Seoul eventually. Jean ran his hands through his hair. She definitely doesn't know about you. The implications hit me like cold water. Whatever was growing between Jean and me, whatever family feeling I discovered with Leo, it existed in a bubble that was about to burst. Mrs. Park arrived like a cultural tsunami. She swept into Jin's apartment the next evening wearing traditional hanbok, speaking rapid Korean, and eyeing every non-Korean element with barely concealed disapproval. When Jin introduced me as his colleague who helped with Leo, her smile was polite and distant. So kind of you to assist, she said in careful English. But family matters are private now. I should have left. Should have recognized the dismissal for what it was. But Leo grabbed my hand as I gathered my things. Can't Zara stay for dinner? She promised to teach me how to make chin-chin. Mrs. Park's eyebrows rose. Chin-chin? Nigerian snacks, I explained. Leo saw me eating them at the office and wanted to learn. I see. Her tone suggested she saw quite a lot. How educational. The dinner that followed was a masterclass in cultural warfare. Mrs. Park served traditional Korean dishes while pointedly asking Leo questions in Korean that he couldn't fully answer. She praised his proper table manners while correcting his posture. She spoke about Seoul schools, Korean traditions, and the importance of cultural preservation. Leoya, she said, using the Korean diminutive, when you come home to Seoul, you'll attend proper hagwon. Korean children must study harder than others to succeed. But I am succeeding, Leo protested. I'm top of my class here, and Zara says. Zara is not family, Mrs. Park interrupted, her politeness cracking. She cannot understand what Korean children need. That chill I felt in that moment, have you ever felt that too? When your heart knows something before your mind catches up. Tell me in the comments if you've been there, your story might help someone else see the signs. I watched Jin's face during this exchange, seeing him caught between his mother's expectations and the life he'd built with Leo in Nigeria. When Mrs. Park suggested Leo spend the summer in Seoul, to reconnect with his heritage, I saw Jin's careful composure finally fracture. He is connected to his heritage, Jin said quietly. Both of them. What heritage? Mrs. Park's voice sharpened. Nigerian confusion? Mixed up identity? Look at this apartment, Korean art next to African fabric. Korean food mixed with foreign spices. No wonder the child is confused about who he is. I'm not confused, Leo said, his small voice cutting through the tension. I'm Korean and Nigerian. Daddy said that makes me special. Mrs. Park turned to me with eyes like winter. You've been filling his head with this nonsense. I've been helping him understand he doesn't have to choose, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. Choose? Mrs. Park laughed bitterly. There is no choice. He is Korean. His place is with Korean family, in Korean schools, learning Korean values. Not this, mixing that leads nowhere. The word, mixing, fell between us like a blade. Jin's hands clenched on the table. Enough, Yama, he said. But Mrs. Park wasn't finished. This woman has no understanding of our family. She sees a lonely man and thinks she can insert herself into Korean business. But Korean men need Korean wives who understand duty, sacrifice, proper child rearing. Stop. Jin's voice cracked like a whip. But Leo was faster. In the sudden silence, he slipped from his chair and ran to me, throwing his arms around my waist. Don't listen to Halmoni, he whispered. You're family to me. You're like my mommy now. The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Mrs. Park's face went white. Jean looked stricken. And I felt my heart break and heal simultaneously as this little boy chose love over cultural expectation, chose the family he wanted over the family others said he should have. Leo, Jean started, his voice strangled. But Mrs. Park was already standing, her hanbok rustling with indignation. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Foreign influence. Improper attachment. That child needs structure, needs Korean guidance, needs to understand his place. His place is with me, Jean said, standing to face his mother. Here. In Nigeria. With the family we've chosen. Family? Mrs. Park's voice rose. This woman is not his mother. She's not even Korean. She doesn't understand what it means to raise a Korean child, to preserve Korean values, to love him unconditionally. I found my voice, standing with Leo still clinging to me. Because that's what he needs. Not cultural purity. Not ancestral approval. Just love. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 generations of cultural expectation, modern love, and innocent need colliding in Jin's living room while Korean pottery watched from shelves next to Nigerian art. Jean looked at his mother, then at Leo, then at me. In his eyes, I saw a man being forced to choose between the approval he'd sought his entire life and the family his heart had already claimed. Mrs. Park broke the silence with words that cut like surgical steel. Choose carefully, Gina. Some mistakes cannot be undone. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. She gathered her purse and moved toward the door. I fly back to Seoul tomorrow. Leo comes with me. No, Jean said quietly. What? I said no, Yama. Leo stays here. With me. With us. Mrs. Park's face transformed with shock, then betrayal, then something approaching grief. You would choose this foreign woman over your own mother? Over your son's Korean future? Jean looked at Leo, still pressed against my side, then back at his mother. I choose love. Whatever form it takes. Whatever culture it bridges. I choose the family that chooses us back. The door closed behind Mrs. Park with devastating finality. In the aftermath, Leo began to cry, not the dramatic tears of a tantrum, but the quiet, confused sobs of a child who'd watched adults hurt each other in ways he couldn't understand. Jean gathered him up, holding him close while looking at me with eyes that held too many emotions to name. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry you had to hear that. But I wasn't sorry. Because in that moment, as we stood together in the wreckage of cultural expectation and family judgment, I realized something that terrified and thrilled me equally. I loved them both. This man who'd chosen authenticity over approval. This little boy who'd called me mommy with innocent conviction. This fragile, beautiful, impossible family that somehow felt more real than anything I'd ever known. The question now was whether love would be enough to survive what came next. The promotion felt hollow when HR called the next morning. Congratulations, Zara. Gene Park has withdrawn his application, so the regional director position is yours. I stared at the phone, feeling none of the triumph I'd expected. 8 months of competition, ended not by my superior performance but by Jin's broken family dynamics. Victory by default wasn't victory at all. 3 days had passed since Mrs. Park's ultimatum. 3 days of Jean missing meetings, of Leo asking colleagues where Auntie Zara had gone, of me throwing myself into transition planning while my heart felt carved hollow. I'd convinced myself that stepping back was the right choice. Mrs. Park was his mother. Korean family bonds were sacred, structured differently than Nigerian families. Who was I to disrupt generations of cultural expectation with my feelings? But Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my Ikoyi apartment. Auntie Zara. Leo's voice carried through my compound gates, followed by Jin's deeper tones speaking to my security guard in hesitant Yoruba. I found them on my doorstep looking windswept and desperate. Jin's usually perfect appearance was rumpled, his hair uncombed. Leo clutched a drawing against his chest. "We need to talk," Jean said simply. "Your mother left for Seoul yesterday morning. Without us." His voice carried exhaustion and something that might have been relief. "She gave me an ultimatum before she left. Choose Korean tradition or lose her support forever." "What did you choose?" "You," he said quietly. "Us. This impossible, beautiful family we accidentally created." Leo stepped forward, holding out his drawing. It showed 4 stick figures standing in front of a house, 2 tall ones, 1 small one, and another tall one with carefully drawn cornrows. "I drew our family," he said. "Will you come home now?" My throat closed. "Leo, sweetheart, it's complicated." "Why?" His 6-year-old directness cut through every adult rationalization I'd constructed. "You love Daddy. Daddy loves you. I love you both. Halmoni was mean, but she's gone now. So why can't we be a family?" Jean knelt beside his son. "Because Auntie Zara is scared. Sometimes when people hurt us, we build walls to protect ourselves. But walls keep good people out too," Leo said, looking at me with those wise eyes that were so much like his father's. I thought about my own family then. Aunt Funmi, who'd raised me after my parents died, who'd taught me that love wasn't about perfect cultural matches but about people choosing to show up for each other every day. She'd loved and lost and loved again, building family from whoever was brave enough to stay. "Your grandmother wasn't wrong about some things," I said carefully. "Cultural differences are real. Language barriers, different values, different ways of raising children. So we learn," Jean interrupted. "We compromise. We build bridges instead of walls. We teach Leo that being Korean Nigerian isn't confusion, it's strength. And if she never accepts us?" Jin's expression grew serious. "Then we build our own family traditions. Korean respect and Nigerian warmth. Structured learning and expressive creativity. Chopsticks and eating with hands. We give Leo the best of both worlds and let him choose what fits." The hope in his voice undid me. Here was a man who'd chosen love over cultural approval, who'd risked his relationship with his mother for the possibility of authentic family. "I brought something," Jean said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small wooden carving, a Korean traditional house with a Nigerian-style extended roof. "I made this last night. When I couldn't sleep. It's not perfect, but it's us," I whispered. "Different architectures, same foundation. Will you come home?" Leo asked again, his small hand finding mine. The word home hit me like a revelation. Not Jin's apartment. Not Korean tradition or Nigerian expectation. Home as the place where people loved you for exactly who you were. "Yes," I said, and watched Jin's entire body sag with relief. But the real test came 2 weeks later when Mrs. Park called from Seoul. "I've been thinking," she said through the video chat, her voice carefully controlled. "Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment. Jin, Leo, and I were cooking dinner together, Korean kimchi jjigae alongside Nigerian pepper soup, because Leo had requested fusion night. We were all wearing aprons, Leo's face dusted with flour from the Korean pancakes we'd attempted. Halmoni." Leo waved enthusiastically at the screen. "Look. Zara taught me how to make Korean food, and Daddy learned Nigerian spices." Mrs. Park's expression softened almost imperceptibly as she watched her grandson bounce between Korean and English, explaining our cooking experiment with uninhibited joy. "He seems happy," she admitted. "He is," Jean said simply. "We all are." "The woman, Zara, she is teaching him Korean traditions?" "I'm learning them myself," I said, stepping into camera view. "Leo is an excellent teacher. He corrects my pronunciation." Mrs. Park studied me through the screen. "You are committed to preserving his Korean heritage?" "As committed as I am to celebrating his Nigerian heritage," I replied honestly. "He shouldn't have to choose between parts of himself." Something shifted in Mrs. Park's expression. Not acceptance, exactly, but a crack in her resistance. "Perhaps I could visit again. Properly this time. To see how he is learning." "You're always welcome, Iyama," Jean said gently. "Family is family." 6 months later, Mrs. Park returned to Lagos with a different energy. She brought Korean traditional clothes for Leo and, unexpectedly, a hanbok in my size. She taught me to make proper kimchi while I showed her how to cook jollof rice. She spoke Korean to Leo in the mornings and learned Yoruba greetings for his school friends. The breakthrough came during a family dinner where Korean banchan sat alongside Nigerian small chops, where Leo switched effortlessly between languages, where Mrs. Park watched me serve Jean with the same attentiveness she'd expect from a Korean daughter-in-law. "You take care of them well," she said quietly as we cleaned dishes together. "They take care of me too," I replied. "That's how families work." "Yes," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I am beginning to understand this." 1 year later, I watched Leo demonstrate his Korean calligraphy skills to his Nigerian classmates during International Day at school. He wore traditional Korean hanbok with a Nigerian geli head wrap that I'd taught him to tie. When asked about his heritage, he stood tall and proud. "I'm Korean and Nigerian," he announced. "My daddy taught me Korean respect and my mommy taught me Nigerian joy. And my halmoni taught me that families can be built lots of different ways, but they all need love to work." Jean found my hand, squeezing gently. "Any regrets?" he whispered. I looked around the school auditorium filled with families of every combination, Korean fathers with Nigerian wives, British mothers with Yoruba husbands, children who spoke 3 languages and felt at home in multiple cultures. "Only one," I said. "That we wasted 8 months competing when we could have been building something beautiful together." Leo ran to us after his presentation, launching himself into our arms with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted he was loved exactly as he was. "Did I do good?" he asked. "Perfect," Jean and I said simultaneously, then laughed at our synchronization. As we drove home through Lagos traffic, Leo chattering in the back seat about his friends' cultural presentations, I realized something profound. Sometimes the person you think is your biggest rival is actually the missing piece of your family puzzle. You just have to be brave enough to stop competing and start loving. Family isn't built on cultural purity or traditional expectations. It's built on daily choices to show up, to learn, to compromise, to love across every difference that tries to divide you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, a 6-year-old will call you mommy and change everything you thought you knew about where home really lives.